LeBron James has made his decision and he is going to the Philadelphia 76ers after a long free agency, I guess you could say, debacle. The decision's made, so let's take some time to reflect. This is Ian Villanueva, and you're listening to Specs. I wanted to talk about this, and I was inclined to talk about this because I feel like this whole saga is the thesis of what this podcast is all about. That ultimately sports are a huge spectacle. I think that in itself is not necessarily groundbreaking or news to anyone. We just saw what the World Cup did in terms of cultural unity and all the videos about people going out into public and Europeans enjoying American culture that we take for granted or whatever all that narrative is about. But it really is about the fact that the attention on LeBron's decision was just about as captivating as actually watching LeBron try to win a title. I know he wasn't involved this year, but in the past when he's chased his first ring and, and joining the Heat, or when he went back to the Cavs and he tried to win a ring for Cleveland, succeeded. Very entertaining, and it's why we watch sports, and it's like ultimately these stories that bring us back. And the Knicks as another example of winning the first title for New York City and also being a very likable team against the next transcendent player in Wembanyama, I think is another great story. I mean, that was perfect for the NBA. But once again, LeBron managed to capture our attention, and it wasn't because of how he played or even the team that he was already on. It was about his decision to go on a team. And there were a couple of different ways to dissect this from a basketball perspective, from a story perspective, from a spectacle perspective. This is still huge. The cultural impact is huge. We talked about LeBron on 2 separate work calls today. It was the first thing. I joined about a minute late, and the people on the call were already talking about LeBron's decision. This was maybe within the first 30 minutes of it being announced. I hopped on another call with a colleague from Philadelphia, and she had talked about how everyone had been contacting her because she has family who are really big Sixers and basketball fanatics. So this was the biggest news. And honestly, within the first few minutes, it was seemingly the most important thing that happened online and social media, at least as it pertained to sports. So as I mentioned earlier, there were a couple of different perspectives to take a look at this from. There's the basketball perspective. And with that, you're kind of thinking about, okay, well, here are the different teams. Where does LeBron fit? It's very traditional. It's the type of thing that they, should be talking about on ESPN. They don't necessarily talk about this stuff anymore all the time, but it's like, where can he go win a ring? Where can he contribute the most? What is going to be the best form of basketball played? And that's, of course, very important to spectacle, but from a storytelling perspective, it's not always the best. I would say from a storytelling perspective, picking the Cavs would have probably been the best. Coming back a third time, trying to win a ring with them, ending in Ohio where he began. He even put in his tweet after the announcement that he's always going to be from Northeast Ohio. He thanked Lakers fans, or he thanked the city of LA, he thanked Miami, all the people who were in contention. And so I think from a heartwarming perspective or a story perspective, the Cavs would have been a great choice. However, I really, really do think that from a spectacle perspective, from the national attention perspective, I do think that the Warriors made the most sense. Teaming up with Steph Curry like he did in the Olympics, both of them trying to team up to win their first ring, not their first, but their 5th ring together, would have been an amazing storyline. I mean, Rich Paul even said it on the other podcast the other day about how you basically have to nationally televise every single one of their games if they're together. And I think that would have been the ultimate spectacle or circus. They're obviously both older now, and the chances of them actually winning a ring, probably not as good with the Sixers or the Heat or even really the Cavs, unless there were a few trades made. But I do think that those are the two names that represent the NBA right now. And I do think that they would be the most fun, and they'd probably draw the most casual interest. Counterpoint to that, or maybe like a counter perspective to that, is that I think that makes the Olympics run in 2024 that much more special, because that actually kind of seals that into some kind of a capsule of like, wow, look at what happens when you put these two together and some greats together to go and try to win something together, to win something meaningful. And I think that honestly just makes it that much more special, because it was really fun to watch them together, and it was really fun to see that run. But again, from a specs perspective, I do think that it would have been the most fun for him to be on the Warriors. I think that just draws the most attention, and it puts it just puts them in the best spot. Moving on to the schedule, there was some talk around that. Adam Silver and some of the rumors out there were that there was some frustration around him not making a decision because they wanted to make the schedule, and so LeBron was like not concerned with that, or maybe irritated by that. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that was going back and forth. And I think that, not sure necessarily about schedule overall, but I do think what this does is it does cement Philadelphia versus the Knicks on Christmas Day as the premier game. I know people had talked about Knicks Spurs, maybe Knicks Celtics, and I think if LeBron had not signed with Philadelphia, I think that would have been the move, because it would have had the Jaylen Brown story. But I do think right now you have Philadelphia and the Knicks on Christmas Day, traditional rivals, defending champions, very, very likely at MSG. I mean, I would say that's just about as much of a certainty as it being Philadelphia and New York. But LeBron at MSG on Christmas Day is perfect. And I think that that's something that the league is going to make happen. I think the other premier game, or, there's always a couple of games on ABC on Christmas. And I think the other one then becomes probably San Antonio and Oklahoma City, if I had to guess. I'm maybe 70 to 80% confident in that, but I'm about 99% confident that it will be Philadelphia at New York on Christmas Day as one of the ABC games. I wanted to wrap this up relatively quickly, but I think the other thing to appreciate here is the career that LeBron has had and the attention that he draws. And I think this is when I realized that, personally, that this was a interesting point, and it was because of LeBron that I realized that I took a lot of interest in the spectacle of sports. And I think back to when he joined the league in 2007. I used to subscribe to Sports Illustrated, and I remember seeing him on the cover. And as a kid, and as a teenager, you're a little bit more naive about those things. So when you see someone on the cover of this national magazine, and I know we don't really have magazines now, but you don't really understand, I think, that that's not necessarily a guarantee for success. The things that I used to read about him, I think in that specific article where they said they interviewed like NBA execs, and there was someone who actually went anonymously. They had said something like, there's only like 4 players in the league right now that I wouldn't trade for LeBron. And I guess at the time what I'm saying is that I really was like, wow, this guy's going to be great. But as you get older, you realize that a lot of times people don't live up to that hype. And I really just think it's incredible that he lived up to and very likely surpassed it. And that's a very generational thing that doesn't happen that much. I mean, it's rare. I mean, to say it doesn't happen that much is probably an understatement. And the fact that it was like this person who was heralded, he was picked number one, and that he made this career. He became the all-time points leader. He won 4 titles with 3 different teams. He might win 5 with 4 different teams, which would mean a ring with 4 different teams, which hasn't been done, is really incredible. I think the other thing about his career is the fact that in 2010, there was this realization that there was a market for this interest. The fact that he was able to have the decision in 2010 and have it televised by ESPN just showed how much the non-game aspect of sports mattered and mattered to people. And it's really incredible that that carried on. That actually was when I realized, wow, I'm very, very interested in this. And this is just as captivating to me as a game or the buildup to a game. And a lot of times when there's buildup to like this really great game with a lot of stars, a lot of time the game tends to underdeliver. I mean, it makes it so much better when it does, but it seems like that's pretty rare. And this was also around the time of the first waves of major college realignment. I think there was it set a lot of the foundation for what's going on now, but that's a different show or a different episode. But that was really cool to read about and to watch and to hear all the commentary about it. And all of that buildup was just as exciting as the buildup is to any kind of game. And so 16 years later, here we were again, wondering what LeBron was going to do, a completely different environment now. I mean, if LeBron was to do something similar, it probably honestly would have been on like a live podcast or something. I don't think it would be on an ESPN show. Yeah, that's what I think would have happened now. And obviously social media wasn't as mature back then, but I think that the amount of conversation happening across the different social media platforms related to where LeBron was going to go was just as frenetic and just as big as the conversation happening before. And you could obviously sense it more because social media is more mature, so you could really see who was talking about it. And it's even somewhat quantifiable in the numbers that they released for Kalshi or Polymarket or one of the prediction markets about how much money was actually bet on, I mean, I guess you can't call it bet, but it was an investment, but into the team he was going to choose. Definitely more than a lot of games, that's for sure, because it's just that exciting to people. And so 16 years later, the fact that he was still able to capture our attention this way, that, I think back to that issue of Sports Illustrated when he was still a junior in high school. And to correct myself from earlier, it wasn't actually 2007 when he was in the league. That was the first year he went to the finals. He got into the league in 2003. But all that said, nonetheless, unbelievable. 23 years later, still worthy of a Sports Illustrated cover. And this decision and the brouhaha surrounding this decision would have merited a Sports Illustrated cover. And the decision around the 76ers would have merited a cover and its own show. So all that to say, congrats to LeBron. I've just really come to appreciate him. I think the other thing about him that makes him just such an all-timer is the fact that he not only lived up to the hype, he played in the league long enough to play alongside his son. And I know that there's a lot of debate around whether his son is an NBA caliber player. I'll leave that to one of the many other podcasts and shows. But I will say that it's very impressive that he has played long enough to play with his son and has built up enough capital to influence the drafting of his son. Like, that's how great he is. And to me, that is the ultimate feat. So, with all that said, LeBron James is a Philadelphia 76er, and congrats to him. Best of luck in winning a championship, and I will for sure watch you play against the Knicks in MSG on Christmas Day. Thanks, everyone.